Tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai ki te hui o te komiti Oranga Hapori, Oranga Taiao e tēnei rā. Welcome everyone to today's meeting of the Connected Communities Climate and Resilience Committee. Our emergency procedures are on the screen there. For those of you who are visitors, in the event of emergency, please follow the directions of our very capable officers who will keep you safe. I'll ask now that our opening karakia be shown on the screen. Elected members, please join me. Me karakia tātou. Tuia te mani aki aki. Rāranga hia te mana rangatira, kia tipu, kia puawai, e ripu ngā wai o te awa kairangi. He kaitiaki ki te whenua, he oranga taiao, he oranga tangata, haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. Moving on to apologies, I have an apology for lateness from Councillor Edwards. We did have one too from the Mayor, and I'll move an apology for lateness from the Deputy Mayor as well. Does anyone have to apologise for an early departure today? No. In that case, I move the motion that the apologies received be accepted and leave of absence granted. Mā wai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Yung. And I'll put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapuaki au kua mana te mōtini, I declare that motion carried. Moving on to public comment. Sorry, I've just got a separate list here. We've got half a dozen parties joining us for public comment today. You have 3 minutes each to speak, and if there's time, we'll take some quick questions from our members within that 3 minutes. Our first registered speaker is Suzanne Doig, Chairperson of the Petone Community House. Speaking to item 6, the Assets Review Update on Community Houses. Kia ora, Suzanne. It's just the button on the right-hand side there to turn your microphone over. We'll hand over to you. Welcome.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I, as Chair has said, are just here to speak to the asset review about community houses, and I would just start my comments with the fact that Petone Community House fully appreciates the need for the Council to move to seek some additional cost recovery or asset management from those community assets. In terms of the program of asset optimisation you're looking towards from those, we would just raise the point that we are highly used as a community asset. We're now one of the very few options in Petone and Allistown, with the loss of the Allistown House and the library hub for community groups to use. We also feel that we offer a considerable degree of an additional amenity to the community through the house's status as a historic house and the fact that it's been operating as a community house for now heading towards 50 years. We just had a few comments in terms of the cost recovery proposals that you're looking for and that we support as an option for us in terms of a lease cost. Our main concern is around affordability for our users. Moving to, as the report suggests, the standard rates for councils would be a 20 to 25% increase on many of our users. Some of our users can afford that, some of them probably cannot. We have a number of small community groups that really don't have the resources to pay those additional fees. In part of that context, we believe paying a lease rate for us is manageable over time. We have some strategies we think we could use to increase our revenue to support those additional costs of paying a lease, but they will take some time to implement. So one of the questions we have for yourselves and for the full council is in terms of moving to a lease rate for us is whether you would consider a staged introduction of that over the first period of the lease to allow us to change some of our charging strategies and invest, and it will require some cash investment from us to drive more use at our underutilised times of the day, which we believe we can do, but we believe will cost us some money to do so. In return for that, we've already indicated to officers that we're certainly prepared to work with officers on ongoing costs of maintenance so that ourselves and officers can agree on what the most high priority maintenance costs are. We are highly appreciative of the level of service we get from the council at the moment in terms of property maintenance, but we're certainly prepared to discuss how some of those costs could be managed better in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Probably got time for a quick question or two if any members have one. Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, obviously the Ellistown Community House has been closed for some time now, and we've already decided to make that permanent. Are you already seeing any extra pressure on your house because of that closure?
We are seeing some people coming from Ellistown, and the challenge we have is that many of the community groups coming from there want weekend and evening space, and we're already at close capacity for that. It's very hard to get a booking in the evenings at the community house, particularly as we only have 1 or 2 rooms that can accommodate large groups. So yes, that is definitely having an impact on us. In one way, it's a good one. We're getting in the extra revenue, but it's probably, I think we've turned away at least 1 or 2 groups from them because we can't just accommodate them at the time they would like to be there.
And a quick second one, you talked about a staged introduction. Are you talking sort of over 12 months staggering up or over a couple of years? What sort of?
Yeah, well, obviously the first lease period of 3 years would be ideal, but at least in the first year would be a great advantage to us if we could have a staggering into the full rate that the council was looking to charge.
Okay, thank you very much, Suzanne, for coming to speak to us today. Our next speaker is Ron Hunter, Chairman of the Avalon Pavilion Charitable Trust, who's speaking to the same item, item 6, the Assets Review Update on Community Houses. Do we have Ron? Yeah. So you can bring up someone else if you like, Ron. Just the button on the right-hand side there. The button on the right-hand side to turn on your mic.
Oh,
and we've got 3 minutes for you, Ron. Please go ahead.
I'm pretty inexperienced, but
welcome.
I'll try and get my 3 minutes in. Thank you. I really want to address the understanding the submission to coming before you to take back the lease on the Avalon Pavilion, and it seemed to be on this notice as it was due to the lease not being paid or that inference. In fact, we have kept account of the lease money. We did on occasion come in to pay it through here. This is some time back, and on advice from the council officer, they said, look, we just don't know, we don't handle it at the moment, but let you retain the lease. In fact, you can spend it on the hall. We did retain it, and we've kept account of it, and it's registered with the commissions, the charity bid commissions. The amount is really a peppercorn rent. It's a sum of $8,449.41, which I can pay now if the wife hasn't used my credit card. But it's so in a sense, we believe we have complied with everything instructed. We pay all the power and all the insurance, the cleaning, and we've provided a lot of enhancement to the hall, the big drop-down screen and projector. In fact, the defibrillator in the hall and the one at the entrance to the Avalon Park was paid and sponsored by us, plus all the chattels, furnishings, curtains, and what. I've got a big list, but so I better not read it out. So that's, we do feel we have done everything. We've asked on 3 occasions for the copy of a new lease. We were prepared and are prepared to look at that and have the opportunity to negotiate, but that's not been provided to us. And the same with the lease payments. We've never ever received an invoice for that either. But the money is there. It's not as if we're trying to avoid that. So, in effect, we feel a little bit let down that some of those things haven't been addressed. Yes.
Thank you, Ron. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you for coming in, and I'm sorry it hasn't been made clear yet. I'm sure it will be answered later today about the process. But in your maintenance, what sort of cost have you spent on maintaining the pavilion?
The maintenance we've carried out? Quite a lot. We've just a year or so ago, we repainted the whole interior of the hall, and that was at a cost of $17,000. We replaced all the ceiling tiles because they were hazard. They were too heavy. In an unfortunate event, if they fell on people, they would cause harm. The tiles now, they could fall on you and you'd fall asleep with them. You know, it wouldn't matter. We've had to repair the roof because there was a leak that caused New Zealand Blood to vacate the hall because we were storing their very expensive equipment in there, and they were afraid the water would damage that. So we had to go ahead and do that. But we've done a lot of that sort of maintenance work in the hall. For instance, the men's urinal has a sensor that controls it, but it had failed, so it was constantly running water. And on top of that, the fire brigade were using the Toby that we pay the water for to hose their engines or test their hoses or whatever. We're not against that, but it was, and we approached the council with that, and they said, look, don't need to pay that. We'll withdraw the cost of the water rates. You don't need to address that. We'll handle that. So, in a sense, when they say take back, we're actually partners. You know, we work with the council. And we're very happy with that. They have done some. They've replaced all the joinery there and made it double glazed and put in 2 very large heat pump systems. So it's a very comfortable hall. We've just engaged New Zealand Red Cross, who are now hiring the hall, and they have equipment, mannequins and so forth in the hall. Yeah, so we feel we're doing everything right, to be fair. And as I have a whole list of things we done and we own, because all the chairs, tables and refrigerators and induction oven and induction stove, all that's been provided by us. Fridge, freezer, hot air dryers, all the cleaning is paid for us, by us, I should say. Yeah, so.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you for coming in today. I'm sorry we're out of time. We will have officers speak to some of your questions when they present the paper later on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, our next speakers are James Scott and Emily Fletcher from Electrify the Hut, speaking to item 10, update on Council's climate change work. Tēnā kōrua, welcome. Same story, we've got 3 minutes for your presentation, but also we'll squeeze in a question or two if we can. Welcome.
Thank you. Ko Emily Toko Inua. I'm here to talk about some good news stories. So as part of our ongoing efforts at Electrify the Hut, which both James and I represent, most recently we put on a solar home tour called What's Inside. We had 10 Eastern Bay's homes that opened up their homes. You can see to a number of different residents who came and had a look at how people are electrifying and adding solar to those homes. It was quite a successful event, and we believe that as a result of putting this tour on, we're going to stimulate about $700,000 of economic impact, which will be put towards electrification. And that's also the equivalent of removing 41 tons of CO2 a year from the actions that people are going to take. At a per attendee cost of only $20, that's a return of about $400 for every dollar that we spent. But more importantly, I think it's the human stories that come out of events like this. So if I can just read the quote from one of our attendees. I've been looking at quotes, so solar quotes, for 3 years now, and the tour made it clear to me that I had done all my research, and now I'm confident in choosing and making a decision. So what we know is that we are in a bit of an energy crisis. A lot of fuel shocks are hitting the system, and people are looking at what they can do, but people aren't sure how to act. And that's what we're trying to do, is help promote some confidence and give people options without selling them anything ourselves. So quite a buzzy event. We're super happy with how things have turned out, and we're hoping that we can use this as a blueprint to do in communities all around the hut and up and down the country. Pretty confident in what we believe the impacts of this are, because just recently we were able to follow up on the expo that we did just over 6 months ago. So we followed up with people to see whether people followed through on the actions they said they were going to take. And as it turns out, they have at a higher conversion rate than what we assumed in our projections. So even from that expo, we believe we've stimulated about $7 million in economic investment into electrification, which is going towards resilience in our communities, as well as reducing costs for a lot of people in the community. Anything to add? Any questions?
No, the only thing I would say is that this is just one of the activities we have planned for this year. We have a number of others, being public sessions to promote electrification, promoting electrification to business entities across the hut, and there will be more coming with ideas that we have in train. And on behalf of the whole team, I would just like to say thank you to the council for the tremendous support we get from all around the council table and the council offices.
Thank you both. Are there any questions? No, in that case, yeah, thanks again for coming in to speak to us, and congratulations on this great initiative and the impact you're having. Thank you. Our next speaker is Nikki Smith from Wainuiomata Community Board, speaking to item 6, the Assets Review Update. Kia ora, Nikki. Welcome.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Chair. Kia ora, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. I'm Nikki. I'm from the Wainuiomata Community Board. At our last community board meeting, we passed a motion requesting more information from council officers about upcoming asset and service level reviews, including any proposal for reduction or divestment of assets and services in the Wainuiomata area. We are keen to understand these early so that we can keep our community informed and engaged. Today's agenda includes a proposed divestment of the Wainuiomata Community House alongside houses in Pomare and Moera. We understand the financial pressures that council is working under and the need to make responsible decisions within very limited budgets. We also recognise that not every asset can be retained as much as communities may wish otherwise. At the same time, we are conscious that Wainuiomata, Pomare and Moera are communities with potentially fewer spaces and higher needs. Reducing community facilities in these areas could have wider impacts on access to programs, services and local activities. As council continues this asset review, the Wainuiomata Community Board is very keen to walk alongside you in this process. We see our role as helping to bring community on the journey, having clear and plain conversations about the changes that are needed, and supporting people to understand the bigger picture. These are difficult decisions and discussions. They will involve trade-offs, but they are discussions that need to be had openly and with full community involvement. To do that, we need visibility of what is coming next, which assets are being considered, what criteria may be applied, and when information will be available. Having this kind of clarity helps us support constructive engagement and reduces the risk of decisions feeling unexpected or that they are made in isolation. It's important that we are viewing a bigger picture and providing input from a diverse range of views to understand the cumulative effects this may have across a community. We appreciate the scale that the council is facing, the challenge, and we want to be part of ensuring that the path forward is transparent, fair and well understood by the people that are most effective. Ngā mihi.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Well spoken. Does anyone have any questions? No? Thank you. And you said you put forward a motion from your own last meeting, so our officers are very well aware of what you would like from them. So thank you very much. Thank you to the board. Our final registered speaker is Peter Hartstrong, also from the Avalon Pavilion Trust, speaking to item 6, the Assets Review Update on Community Houses. Kia ora, Peter.
Thank you very much for allowing us to attend. And it's only 11 days that the council officers called us to a meeting to discuss this subject, and then they're reminding us that the lease expires on the 30th of June. So we've got a number of concerns because the service clubs built the pavilion, for those who can remember, and there was financial assistance at that time from both the Lions and Rotary to keep it going. And the trust has been managing that pavilion, which is a wonderful lower hut facility, for some years. And it's also the home for a number of groups, particularly Lions and Rotary. So we would be particularly concerned if the council goes ahead and takes back management of the pavilion. When would that happen? Because we're talking about less than 2 months before the lease expires. And also, what security will there be for ongoing meetings of Lions and Rotary, ideally at the same rental as now? Because if they lose their homes, they're going to be a death knell to the clubs, because we're reliant on our volunteers. A lot of them are getting older. It's difficult to attract young members. The Lions run the mini train and the mini golf on the park, which is recognised as a great facility for all the families. So we are hoping the new lease at $25,000 plus the costs, many of which the trust already pays for, is just not able to be serviced. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. You mentioned how the pavilion was built and managed by service clubs. I was curious about what the relationship is between those service clubs and the Avalon Pavilion Trust. Who is the Avalon Pavilion Trust, and is it representatives of those different service clubs, or is it more than that?
The trust has, the trustees are members of Rotary and Lions.
Thank you. Are there any other further questions, members? Councillor Dyer and then Councillor Parkin.
Yeah, you mentioned at the start 11 days ago. Could you just clarify what happened 11 days ago?
24th of April, the council officers invited the pavilion trustees on the 24th of April and presented the choices that they said the council has of demolishing, retaining, or renewing leases for facilities such as ours.
And was that the first you knew that there was a conversation happening about
Correct.
the future of the pavilion?
As Ron said earlier, we've been asking the council for quite some time to get a renewal, because we knew the lease was coming up for expiration.
And you mentioned the new lease being proposed as 25K.
25,000 plus all the costs.
Okay,
One of which, as Ron said, is the water, which is a high bill because of the leak, which the council hasn't fixed, and also the use of the water by the fire brigade.
Councillor Parkin?
Sorry?
Sorry, you've just got another question for you from Councillor Parkin.
So I'm just trying to get the, it's all right, the question is actually to officers in terms of the amount of the lease that was requested, because it's not quite aligning with my understanding of where the leases needed to be. So the question will be to officers. You've already answered it from your point of view. If it was nearly 30K, you cannot afford that. Right, thank you.
The pavilion is used by Lions, Rotary, there's Red Cross. It's very busy, particularly at weekends, children's parties and things like that. And the rentals that the trust charge at the moment are modest, because it's a community facility. It's like so many things. We like to have things accessible for families. And if the rentals go up, then people will just turn away. And
Thank you,
similarly
Peter.
with Lions and Rotary, we pay rental, of course, because we've got to pay for the power and things like that. But that's our home that we use for the bases for our volunteers who do so much in this community.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Peter.
I'm
I'll just
passionate
ask
about
you a
it.
question we've asked of prior groups, because we've had Rotary, who you mentioned, come in before about assets they have built and gifted to the council. And our question for them was, would they be willing to take back ownership of that asset? So I guess the same question may apply to you. Would the Avalon Pavilion Trust or the service clubs who built and donated that facility to council be willing to take ownership of that facility, have it donated back to them?
Without talking to other trustees, I wouldn't like to comment on that at the moment.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you. We'll just take one more question from Deputy Mayor Brown.
The revenue in the report is that you're making revenue each year around $38,000. Is that correct? And
No,
it's not?
no.
Okay.
There's some years the pavilion actually has made a loss. You know,
Okay.
we
Take
did-
that up with the officers.
We did well when we had the blood service, as Ron said, but because of issues with flooding, they moved out because the equipment was going to be possibly damaged. And that flooding was a structural thing. That was really a council issue. A drain up above the entranceway got blocked, and the whole entranceway was like Niagara Falls. So they moved out because they couldn't take the risk of having their equipment damaged. And they were a good tenant, you know, every Thursday, Friday, and good, reliable tenant. So we lost them because of the state of the building.
Thank you
Council
very
building.
much, Peter. We'll leave it there. Thank you for coming in and speaking to us today.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Dyer, could I just ask you to turn that microphone off, please? Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 4, which is conflict of interest declarations. Just to note, I know that members will have conflicts regarding our public excluded paper today, but we'll deal with those in the public excluded part of the meeting. So in regards to the public agenda for today, do any members have conflicts of interest that they would like to declare? I see hands going up. We'll just go around this direction, starting with Councillor Shaw.
Yes, I am a council delegate with the Pumari Titan Community Trust.
Thank you. Councillor Puketapu.
Yes, I'm the iwi rep on Wainumata High School Trust.
Thank you. And there's one over this side, Councillor Barrett.
I am the president of the Eastern Hut Rotary that lives in the hall at the moment. Thank you.
Lives in the hall. Okay. Thank you very much. Any further conflicts to be declared? If one pops up during the meeting, please just let us know before we start on an item. And we'll move on to item 5, which is the draft use of Hutt City Council land policy. It's on page 9 of your agenda. I'll ask Arthur Nelson, Head of Parks and Reserves, and Nicole Purifoy, Leasing Coordinator, to speak to the item. Tēnā kōrua.
Kia ora. I will just take this report as read. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move straight into questions then, and we have one from Deputy Mayor Brown.
I have two questions. The first is having a favourable view of commercial on public land, and does that override the core principle of community first, which was the core principle? And second, it's not going out for a consultation. Have you had interaction with iwi and mana whenua on this?
So in terms of commercial versus community, we actually see a lot of commercial actually helping activate the spaces and supporting the community. Many of the small businesses that we do support, they're already members of this local community. Earlier in the year, we did activate a mobile commercial license portal where small businesses who are mobile, like food carts, coffee cart, can apply online. So in this way, that helps bring in just small additional revenue to council, but also brings a bit more activation to these spaces, but also giving these local businesses a bit more marketing and more revenue for them as well. In terms of consultation, nothing materially has changed in this report. So we were advised that did not need to go to widespread community. We have been already discussing with our tenants. We do have about 250 concessions overall. So we have been discussing with them, but nothing significant has changed. No large material changes have been done.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. It's a good report. Good to have these things defined and so on. When there is a concession, and I'm thinking of places like the Esplanade where there's likely to be quite a few interested, how does it work? Is it first in, first served, or if there's a lot of interest, it then goes up for some sort of tender, or?
That's an excellent question. So our two most sought after spaces are the Esplanade and Avalon Park. Currently, we feel there is not enough capacity for these spaces to support any mobile traders. So when capacity arises in our team, which we are thinking to put on a work program, we would like to go out for a tender, which we have done in the past before. So for Avalon Park, I think it's about 6 or 7 years ago, we had an open tender when we thought it was like an open expression of interest, and it was like a procurement process where we had our own internal review. So currently at the moment, there's no plans to go out for tender for the Esplanade, but as there's a lot of change going on, we definitely want to align with being able to allow for a higher capacity. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add to what Nicole said. So at the moment, we've not got a rush of people coming and asking for these spaces, but if that does become an issue, and certainly with the improvements to the cycleways and Petone Esplanade, there might well be that need to go to tender, because we won't want to be seen to being partial or biased to a particular individual. So those things will come. I think I'm just going to mention here that you've probably seen a lot of these licenses and what have you come in front of council in recent times, because Nicole is really knocking them out. So this is quite an important piece of work for us. As I say, currently it would be fair to say that it's probably as you first come, first served. We would also need to look into, we wouldn't want sort of 3, 4, 5 different coffee carts all at the same place. So, we apply a little bit of discretion to ensure that there is quite a wide remit of services there. And the ultimate of any of these concessions is it needs to be able to add to the value of the reserve. And clearly, things like pizza or coffee in places like Avalon Park, which are well used, do that. So we do operate a reasonably stringent approach in whether we grant these concessions or not.
Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora. Just a quick question around the roading corridor encroachments. In terms of the garages, when does that kick in? Is it a whole garage that needs to be on the encroachment, or is it a whole car park that needs to be on the encroachment? Or if, say, your garage is sticking out by 10 mil, when does that kick in, basically?
Yes. Typically, it's if any part of the private improvement is over on the footpath or the roading corridor carriageway. This is actually done under discretion, however, under the roading and transport team. Mostly their stance is for any existing or historical encroachment is acceptable, but for any new possible encroachment, their stance is to say no, to try to mitigate this, but it is just for any sort of overhang.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. Question on the commercial activity as well. And I agree with the policy that we need to have this policy to tighten it up to give us some guidance. But in regards to the Esplanade space, do you have a maximum limit or an area that's reserved for food stalls or sites or commercial activity?
Yeah, so currently we don't have an exact science right now. We've only recently started to bring up these levels of service for mobile concessions. So we do intend to kind of figure out what the exact kind of this carrying capacity, so to speak, is. We do want to figure out how many mobile carts we can have without blocking parking or having blocking any sort of public access. So it's still a bit in the works. We do wish to increase this number.
Yeah, again, I'll just add something to this. Normally, numbers that you're referring to would be covered in the reserve management plan for a particular site. The reserve management plan, I think, for certainly our foreshores is well overdue. I mean, I think it goes back to 2014 or something. So, it's a long time coming. The other issue is that I think everyone's quite well aware of is that the Esplanade is going to be subject to quite a bit of change. So we need to understand, we need to have an overarching plan as well. And we have got money in the reserves investment strategy at some point in the not too distant future to do a little bit of a planning episode, which will, develop our thinking in that area. The other thing to consider is obviously Petone Wharf. connected with the 11,000 people that are supposed to be using the cycleway over the month. All those things are going to have to be built into some sort of overarching plan or process so that we know what we're going to do in various areas. At the moment, as I say, we've not got massive amount of people asking for concessions on the area, so it's manageable at the moment. But clearly, we do need to do some bigger thinking about it in terms of integrating it with the rest of the development in that area.
I'll go Councillor Edwards and then Councillor Puketapu.
I'm sure you've thought of it, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. As you're weighing up, you know, whether this is good for the public and all those other criteria that you've mentioned, is one of the criteria the proximity of other rate-paying food and other businesses, so that you know, do you take that into account?
There is, I mean, there's a very recent example of that where we had a CAF who wasn't happy about a concession we gave, but the offerings are different. I mean, a CAF is an indoor experience. It's you know, with all that brings. Whereas the experience that was offered in terms of this concession was a completely different offering. So yes, we do take it into account. And if there was an absolute repeat that might be problematic in terms of other you know, commercial offerings, then we need to think about that real careful as well.
Councillor Puketapu.
Hi, thank you. Just a question of clarity, and following on from Councillor Brown's question earlier, when the question was asked whether or not mana whenua had been engaged in consultation process. Your response was that there was no requirement to go to wider community consultation. My question is that where we put mana whenua in the wider community consultation, or how do we determine the difference between wider community consultation and mana whenua, given we have a partnership in place?
Yep. I can probably speak to that one. So what this policy is doing is actually just putting into action a decision that was made as part of the LTP. So as part of the LTP, Council agreed on an assets review that would increase the charges for leases and for concessions, etc. And now this is being operationalised through this policy. So the decisions that are within this policy were already agreed as part of the LTP. The opportunity has been taken to bring some other policies together to create a more functional and usable policy. So the key components of this around how council charges for the use of land were consulted on as part of the current LTP, which had significant mana whenua involvement.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Lewis, Councillor
Thank you. Sorry, a query around, can you repeat what you said about not going out to public consultation? I've just got a concern with the reasons why we're not. Yeah.
So at the moment, we don't have the number of queries. I mean, we've not got like 4 or 5 people asking for the same pitch on a park. You know, it's one, usually maybe 2. And the concessions we offer are relatively short term. You know, again, we're not locking people in for years and years here. So as things change and as conditions change, then obviously we would, if we started getting a lot more pressure for a particular site, then yes, we would need to consider going to some sort of tender arrangement, as Nicole mentioned earlier.
Councillor Dyer.
Thank you. Yeah, just want to clarify, through the long-term plan, we made decisions to increase the cost recovery by no more than 30%, or 19% of the actual costs incurred by council. And it seems like in all these papers, there's slightly different interpretations to what was actually decided. This one is saying we will increase the rates by 30% without that 19% caveat mentioned. And 30% was like the maximum we wanted to go for, but it seems like that's been interpreted as, let's go straight to 30%. Whereas the intention for that was to provide a staggered approach to get to places. This policy talks about charging hall users 9,500. What are they paying now? Because if that's more than a 30% jump, then that straight away breaks what we had already agreed to.
I think just if I'm going to respond to that, the 2 different things, the leases, the prices for a square metre of a lease, a standard community lease or something like that was set in 1994. What we've done is increase that figure by 30%, which is now 540 or something like that for that square metre. So we've not increased it any more than that. What I do have to say is that doesn't even reflect the land value of those sites. So again, as we move forward, and this is one of the reasons we obviously looked at delinking this policy from the context of the actual delinking the fees from the context of the policy, because we are one heck of a long way behind in terms of the value, certainly for community leases and commercial leases, land-based. The 9,500 I think you're referring to is more about where there is a community hall or a community facility, a building or so on and so forth. That's the standard 9,500 on community houses, which is part of the next part of the upcoming report. So it is a different element.
But the fees are set in this policy.
Fees, Councillor Dyer, we're talking now about land leases and land leases only. We're still
Sorry
on
if there's confusion. The policy doesn't set the fees. Previously, the fees and charges were in the old 1994 policy, which made our charging very inflexible. So what this does is just takes out the fees, and we make it flexible through the long-term plan and annual plan, which is pretty standard for how council gives fees. So the difference, so the 19%, that's how much it costs for us to maintain a premises typically. Everything else for concessions is based on what the old policy was for, which is like the permits, the licenses, the ground leases, which are like a club owns their building and then they're just paying for the boundary space. So that's the bit of the difference.
Okay, so the page I'm referring to is page 24, which is the appendix to this paper, which says council halls will pay 9,500. So I understand there's a paper coming up on the community houses, but the fees are set here in the concession fees and charges appendix. So all the fees being charged through this policy change, draft use of Hutt City Council land policy, isn't that what we're on?
Yeah, you're
Appendix
correct,
2?
Councillor Dyer. Yeah, it does refer to that $9,500 figure and how it was developed, and that the point of it is to achieve a 19% cost recovery for council facilities.
Yeah, so my question is, that's what it says, but it's not tagged to that 30%. Is this a 100% jump up? I don't know. I can't see the old policy.
Yeah,
So I just want clarity. Are we increasing the fees by no more than 30% and recovering 19%? They're the two caps for all the fees that we are changing through this policy.
On a standard lease or a concession, we will be achieving the 30%. So it will be and we're talking about land-only lease essentially. So where you've got a club that might build on a piece of land, that is being set at the 30%. The other is council-owned facility, which is a separate thing. The appendix here is not part of the policy that we're putting forward. It's just there for people to get an indication of what it is we're proposing.
It's the appendix of the report itself.
These all make their way through our annual plan, which we sign off.
Yes, and they'll be displayed on the council website. So as the report discussed, we will intend to have also an online portal for all applications for use of council land where all this information will be displayed.
So just for clarity, the asset review reset three things: land leases, building leases, and what council charges for community space. And they're all represented in the fees and charges appendix. That's how it appears in the LTP.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions before we move on? We are here substantively to discuss the actual policy. The fees are set and determined elsewhere. Does anyone have any feedback on the policy? I have one thing actually, which is just in the definition section, the very last definition in there. This is on page 16 of our papers about temporary. Refers to any activity that has a total duration of 10 days or 6 consecutive days. I assume that's up to 10 days or 6 consecutive days. So just a minor change there, but that is the policy that we're discussing today. Are there any further questions or feedback on the policy itself before we move on? Deputy Mayor Brown? No? Okay. In that case, I will move on to the recommendations. One, that the committee recommends that council notes and receives the report. 2, adopts the draft use of Hutt City Council land policy attached as Appendix 1 to the report. And 3, notes any feedback from the committee. There's just been that one small thing to be incorporated prior to council consideration. Mawai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Tonga Grant. Is there any debate? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. As I said, I do agree with having a policy. My concern is still around the area in particular is the Esplanade. And in light of what you've talked about, the expansion with the cycleway and everything like that, and in knowing that we have a business area, not even a K away, it's like a stone's throw away. You've got Jackson Street who are screaming out for business, but yet we are looking to promote, other businesses to come in. They're not ratepayers, come in and rent a space and take trade away from our key commercial area in Petone. My concern is for that, and but I do support the policy, but it's just that particular area. And Avalon Park, I can understand you're away from commercial, buying food and things like that. But for Petone, one of their drivers for the Esplanade and the growth of the cycleway is to bring people into their area. So this is like they're fighting again, so I'm really concerned that council is going to go ahead and promote an area just a stone's throw from a retail strip.
Any further comments? No, in that case, I will put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapua ki au, kua mana te mōtini. I declare that motion carried. Moving on to item 6, the Assets Review Update, Community Houses. It's on page 25 of your agendas. I will ask Andrea Blackshaw, Director of Neighbourhoods and Communities, and Arthur is staying at the table and also being joined by Rose Thomas, Facilities Project Lead, to speak to the item. I'll hand over to Andrea first.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Probably helpful if I give a little bit of background on the asset review, and that it was part of the long-term plan, as I mentioned, and as part of that, every leaseholder was sent a letter, which is, I guess this is 2 years ago now when we were consulting on the current LTP. So every leaseholder was sent a letter and told that as part of the LTP, we were consulting on this change, and that when their lease came up for renewal, we would be applying the new rates that were in the LTP, and that we would. So this was to give them plenty of heads up that these changes would be happening. As part of the LTP, we also had a specific meeting that everybody was invited to, and about 50 organisations who hold leases took the opportunity to come along to that meeting where we talked through these changes. Obviously, the asset review agreed a set of principles that council's now applying, but they can only be applied as leases expire, because leases are legal documents. And so as they expire now, we're working through these as sets of assets. Some of you will recall we did the community halls last year, and this year we're doing the community houses. But every leaseholder did receive a letter as part of the LTP telling them that when their lease expired, these new rates would come into force, and it was consultation. I guess the asset review recognises that there are a number of historic arrangements in place where assets, while they might be, they're definitely all providing community benefit, absolutely, providing particular benefit to the people who hold the lease, but that they may not be optimised and they may not be achieving the level of cost recovery that council is now requiring. And that cost recovery is to ensure that the cost of paying for these assets is fairly shared between the people who are benefiting from them and the ratepayer, because every time that a user is not paying for something, the ratepayer is paying for it. So the recommendation, the other thing is that the council's recently obviously agreed a new target operating model, which says that we will need to divest more assets in the future to ensure that we can manage the rates burden as well. So the recommendations in this report respond to both of those things. What council's agreed around what it would like to see around optimisation and cost recovery, and what council has agreed around the need to divest some assets to reduce the rates burden. In terms of just a couple of the questions that were asked, I could probably hit off a couple of those at this point too. The current users of assets are all being, as with community halls, are being offered the same time that they had to book out the same time that they had in an asset. So nobody's use of an asset is changed by these recommendations. The cost, though, is changed, and that's in line with what council has agreed around increased cost recovery. The access will be there, the cost will be different. That's probably as much as I need to say right now, but happy to answer questions.
Yeah, I'll just check if Arthur or Rose has anything to speak to in the paper itself.
Sorry, just if I could just add a little bit to Andrew said. There was a couple of mentions earlier on from the public gallery about this being because of cost and not being paid. That's not the case. This is about the same process that Andrew's described, which is trying to get a better return on assets. So just thought that was mentioned in respect of Avalon Park before we move forward and respond to any questions.
Okay, we'll start with Councillor Shaw, Councillor Parkin.
Thank you for the report, and I think we all understand the need for this paper to come before us. Just a question I have, and it was raised earlier by one of our public speakers. Has there been any consideration for community houses in high needs areas in terms of lease costs and in particular, Pomari, Moera, Wainui and Petone have also mentioned similar. So has there been any thought given to those communities that serve, houses that serve those communities?
So there's currently not an equity lens on these charges. That's something that council may want to consider, but there's currently not an equity lens.
Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora. Just some clarification over the costs of the Avalon Pavilion. We've got the current annual revenue listed. The indication from public speakers was that it was around $30,000 for the rent. Could you actually confirm what the proposed rental agreement for the Avalon Pavilion actually is?
As in the report, I think the figures about 25,000 is what we're talking to meet those requirements for increases to make sure that facilities are returning the 19%. That's the figure that we've been quoted. While we're just on the subject, I think there's probably another couple of things just around this that are probably worth mentioning. Again, the speaker talked about paying for internal improvements to the building. That will cost more, but again, it would be a standard lease item. It's not unusual. People normally pay for the internal and outgoing. So all those things have to be taken into account in terms when you're trying to manage a facility like that. But they would be part of the existing lease, those things anyhow.
Councillor Edwards.
While we're on Avalon Pavilion, and I might well have misheard or might be misunderstanding something, but we have in our report that Avalon Pavilion is revenue returns are 38,360, but I think I heard the gentleman from the Lions say, well, absolutely disputing that figure. This is the money that the trust collects from users of the pavilion, I take it?
Yeah, so the figures we've got in front of you there come from the Charities Commission website, and obviously all charities need to register on that, and that's what the website says. So that's the figure we've picked out because that's the one that's advertised on the Charities Commission website.
What's the current lease arrangement with Avalon? What do they currently pay?
The current arrangement was supposedly 10% of revenue, from what I recall. But again, as you probably heard, that's not been enforced or managed in that way. But again, I hasten to add, this is not really about what's gone in the past. This is about where we are in terms of the assets review. And the asset review has said we need to return more money in from that particular facility. So all the history around it, you know, all well and good, but that's not why this report is in front of the council at this moment in time. It's here purely and simply in respect of that proposal to increase income.
I understand that, but we decided to increase the rates from what the previous arrangement was. So there is some relevance to what they were previously paying. So if it was 10% of the current revenue at 38,000, their rent should be 3,800. We're proposing to increase that to 25,000, which is significantly more than a 30% increase that we agreed to.
Which will be on the basis of the 19% that council requested for improving returns from the community. So again, you know, I have to say officers don't just come up with things, they come up as they're directed. And if we're directed to make a return of 19%, then that's obviously what we do. And it would look like that is the figure we're talking about in this particular instance. I mean, clearly, if council doesn't want to do that or wants to do something a little bit different, that's obviously in council's remit to do that.
It was for both. There was, I mean, paragraph 5 says that as part of the council's agreed to increase charges by up to 30%, but not beyond the 19% cost recovery mark. So we are increasing it significantly more than 30%. It's not one or the other. It's got to be both. That's what was decided when the draft LTP was signed off. 3.8 to 25,000 is significantly more than 30% increase.
Again, my understanding is the 19%, and I'm sure Rose can qualify this, that the 19% is on the cost of running the facility. So again, the past, how it may have been and where we're moving to is not really the same thing, if you see where I'm coming from. It's more about this is what it's costing us to manage it, and this is 19% of the cost to manage it.
And as a stepping point to getting to that 19% recovery, we said cap it at 30%. So over time, we could get to that 19%. But this just seems like we're jumping straight to 19% without consideration of that 30%, which was a key decision we made. That was the reason for the 30%, was to provide a increment increase, which is what public speakers are asking for.
Just to note, the 30% was on land leases.
Yeah, so the paragraph 5 here says, council agreed to increase charges for existing leases and licenses for buildings by up to 30%. I think Councillor Dyer's making a valid point that here we're proposing to increase it by much more than 30%. So are we in keeping with the revenue and finance policy where it was decided to, according to this paper, increase charges for existing leases and licenses for buildings by up to 30%? This is paragraph 5 if you're looking for the text.
Looking again, if you're through your chair.
I'm just going to call a point of order. Are we still at questions? And are you asking the question, Chair?
We're still asking a question. I'm just
Councillor
trying
Dyer
to
asking the
clarify what
question?
Councillor Dyer's question
So
is.
if it's a question, can we ask that the officers go away and get it? Because it's, yeah.
Well, I think the answer to the question is no, we're not following our own policy if we're increasing the rent by up to 30%, by more than 30%.
So we can go and have a look at, clarify that, but what we can do is say that what we're proposing will be in line with what's in the policy.
Sure. Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora, Chair. We've already made this type of decision on a number of other community halls and have increased the rents on those halls previously. If we come back and decide that we have not followed that 30%, we've actually got to go back and change that from an equity lens on a number of other organisations. So I'm not sure. I will be very intrigued to see what's happening, because if not, we haven't been following our private policies the whole time. And so if officers can include that in the feedback when they come back with the answer to that question.
Not a question there? Sounded like a comment. Sure. Can you please include that piece of information? Councillor Brown.
Yeah,
Deputy
sorry.
Mayor.
I was just going to do another point of order there. Was that a question for a request? And does Chair want us to take a 5-minute break to clarify it, or come back with the information? Because it's, yeah.
I think we'll just continue. If there's any more questions for now, we might have to take a break when we get to the recommendations. Councillor, sorry.
Can I just raise a procedural matter? In the recommendations, the amount of rent for that facility is not part of the recommendations for this paper. what's being recommended is that facility is taken back into council control so that it can be optimised and it can have greater cost recovery. So the proposed rent, and we can clarify it, but it's not relevant to the decision that's been asked for today.
Thank you. Councillor Tonga Grant.
Yeah, so just clarifying, the tenants, the current tenants in those spaces will not be losing their spaces and they will still have their bookable, the times that they currently use the space. And for some of the halls, our council will be taking over the bookable, putting it onto bookable. That's, yeah, cool.
That is correct, and councillors will have seen that all other properties that have gone on to bookable have increased their optimisation and increased their return to ratepayers.
Thank you. Councillor Parkin.
Sorry, I just have a query over how we come to the conclusion that the rent that we are asking for the business, for the organisation, is not relevant, because part of this decision-making process is that the organisations have first right of refusal, and if they cannot afford the rent, then it comes back into council. So that decision-making to decide to bring it back into council is directly relevant to the rent that they are being asked to pay. Am I correct in that understanding?
No, it's not a first refusal. Council is proposing to bring it back into council.
I think you may be confused because there are kind of two separate groups we're talking about here. One is the actual community houses where the conversations will be exactly as you described. There is essentially a separate proposal for council to take back over management of two facilities, Avalon Pavilion and Treadwell Hall, which are not community houses, but on the basis that council could better optimise their use and return. I think Councillor Jung had her hand up earlier, and we'll come back to the other side.
Kia ora, I have a few questions to start off with Treadwell and Avalon. Can I just clarify, did we ever go into a conversation about divestment of those two? And if not, why?
Sorry, we haven't had a conversation around divestment of Avalon Pavilion. It's actually quite a good facility in the middle of Avalon Park. And there is potential, I think, to make it a useful, should we say, addition to council's portfolio of facilities. So, you know, the initial would be to maintain it in some way, manner or form. And that's why we've essentially said about it coming back to council, because there is opportunities there, I think, for the wider community as well.
Okay, over this side of the room, Councillor Edwards, I think you had your hand up. No? Councillor Barrett, did you have your hand up? Are you permitted to ask questions? But Councillor Barrett, do you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you...
That's all right. His question's been answered.
Thank you, bit of confusion there. Although I understand that the proposed cost is not taken into the recommendation, and thank you, Andrea, for explaining that. If this does go ahead, will there be further conversation with the long-term tenants as to affordability for the future going forward?
There's certain things, I mean, in Avalon Pavilion, I think there's a number of people that store stuff as well. So we would need to assess whether that's the optimum thing for Avalon Pavilion. But generally, we would clearly try to ensure that people could remain in there, yes.
Sorry, so conversation will be had with the long-term, am I right in assuming that conversation will be had with the long-term tenants as to affordability for them to remain as tenants?
Are you asking whether there would be a discount for them? So council, as part of the LTP, agreed on the cost recovery and the charges for a lot of its community spaces. And we had a conversation at that point around the balance that we try to strike around affordability, but what we need to get around cost recovery. So it's council's discretion at where it wants to set things, but the recommendations here are for the rates to be as it was agreed, and any higher rates would be similar to what council hires its other facilities for, as that's the level of cost recovery that council requested.
Councillor Ravi.
I'm just, sorry, I'm just seeking clarification with regards to what's the rationale. I do understand that it is about optimizing the space for Avalon Pavilion in particular, and council is taking it back. But from the speaker's point of view, it's very clear that it's being utilized very well and very well subscribed and maintained as well. So I'm not sure what is the rationale for us to take it back. Thank you.
I'll probably speak more broadly here rather than about that particular asset. But often an asset has been managed in a way that works really well for the organisation that is leasing the asset and for maybe 2 or 3 particular users. But what we're finding is that when we are putting facilities onto Bookable, we are getting much greater use of assets. It's much more accessible. People can see it online among a range of other assets. So it's much more accessible, and we are getting more revenue in for other similar sort of facilities. So often, you know, every facility is returning value for money and benefiting the community. What council has asked us to do is optimise that, and that's the opportunity.
So, sorry, a follow-up question on that is, so we don't have data on what kind of bookings we get there because we are not able to see it on Bookable or the process is not clear. So we are assuming that we would get more bookings if it was on Bookable. Is that my understanding correct on that?
Yes, and anecdotally, we have feedback from the community that some of our facilities are easier to book than others. And it's
So
usually
it's more a process issue rather than utility, the utilization of the actual asset.
Well, it's a different process that we believe would lead to optimisation of it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stallinger.
Just a little related question. Is there any opportunity for, just using Avalon as an example, to have assets which we don't manage directly utilise the software, or is that a licensing problem?
Currently, there's not the opportunity with Bookable, but we would look to do something like that in the future. And so that would be a further phase of that. There are also other models, and anyone who remembers what happened with the community halls will know that we came to a bespoke arrangement with Mangaraki Hall around the use of their hall and the way that happens so that it both meets their needs and meets council's requirements around optimisation and cost recovery. So there are various ways this could be done. Officers are recommending the recommendations represent what council has asked officers to do, and there can be conversations around some flexibility, but essentially we need optimisation and we need greater cost recovery.
Councillor Dyer, did you have another question?
Yeah, just looking at the community houses specifically, it talks about the rents charged currently at market rates, but is forgiven, i.e. not charged. Is that just in this last 2 years while we've been kind of given them notice, or has that been a long-standing arrangement?
That's been the long-standing arrangement.
My second question was on Avalon Hall. The speaker mentioned they'd only learnt about these proposed changes 11 days ago. Obviously, they got the letter 2 years ago saying this will come up. But is it correct they've only had 11 days to basically say, pay us 25K or we'll take the building over?
So there'll be nothing happening at Avalon Pavilion for at least 8 weeks, because that's the length of the existing lease. So clearly, if they want to come forward with some other sort of proposal, then obviously we'd look at it like we'd look at everything else. But the current proposal is, and I think you heard from the previous speaker, that they couldn't afford the higher rate anyhow. So, you know, I think we'd be more than happy to listen to people if they want to talk to us. This is, at the moment, is just a recommendation from our perspective, as we think that would probably be a better result for the community. And as I say, that's really where we are, but there's still 8 weeks before anything else happens.
Okay, sorry, I don't think you actually answered my question. The question was, have they only had 11 days notice that you need to pay 25K or we will take it in-house?
I think there's been discussions. That's most recent, yes. We sent them a letter to that effect. But as I say, we are more than happy to listen to any conversations. There's still 8 weeks to go before the lease expires.
Can I just add, though, that there was a letter that went out to all leaseholders telling them that when the lease expired, these new rates would apply.
They got notice of that 11 days ago.
They got that letter 18 months ago.
The letter saying what those changes will be was 2 weeks ago.
No, it was 18 months ago, saying that when their lease expired, this would
Go up to 25,000.
would say it would increase by what the policy has been reset and it would impact their lease.
So the only notice they've had, it'll be 25K, was less than 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, the initial letter that Andrea's referring to is the original letter that went out to all groups to say, council are obviously looking at these things. So the most recent would be, yes, that's when they've been notified, but it's also what that the group asked us for information on that and running the building as everything else. So we provided that as part of from their request.
Arthur, you've mentioned that you're happy to have further discussions with the Avalon Pavilion Trust. Noting that our committee today is making recommendations up to council, is it possible that further discussions could be had before our next full council meeting and a more clear recommendation would come before that meeting?
I think officer's recommendation is probably what it is in this paper. If council would like us to investigate something else, we just need some understanding of what that is.
Okay. Are there any further questions before? Yeah, we've got a couple down there. Councillor Ravi first and then Councillor Young.
Yeah, just wondering if we could have a discussion on the point Councillor Shaw raised as well about the low decile houses, the places where, like Pomare House and Taita as well, please. Thank you.
If you have any questions about it, you're welcome to ask those now. We will go into debate and you can talk about that all that you like in the debate phase of this. That's where we just have a discussion. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I've got Councillor Young first and then we'll come to Councillor Puketapu.
Kia ora, on page 26, 6C, says whether assets are still meeting their intended purpose in the current context of the asset within a neighbourhood setting. I'm wondering, is there like a needs basis map or a document that actually helps us measure that? It seems like the other two are quite easy to kind of say gauge and measure, but I'm curious about this third one about how we actually ensure that those facilities, etc., meet the needs of our community.
Sorry, which point was that?
6C on page 26.
Yep, no, there's not a document. That's a broad context conversation with the users, with the people running the asset usually, and often understanding their data, because if someone else is running an asset, we won't have any data on it. So there's not a particular document that guides that.
Councillor Puketapu.
Just a question on Treadwell Hall. If we've got a positioning or any thoughts from, because I can see that Tihei Rangatahi, Kokiri Marae are currently leasing that, if what their positioning is, or if there's been conversations with them about Treadwell.
Yep, we have had conversation with them and they're supportive of this. They don't want, they've had a lease, but they are happy to transition to booking the space and the time that they need so that the facility can be used at other times.
Sure, thank you. And the second one is, if it's okay to ask a question about Parkway Community House. Given I declared a conflict, I just wanted to understand if we've had similar conversations with Wainemata High School.
Just defer to officers on that one, conversation with Parkway Community House.
Just to clarify the question, that the report talks about Wainemata High School currently leasing Parkway Community House, and there's a few other small groups that are utilising that as well. So just the question again around consultation with them and if there's been any conversations with them face to face.
Sorry, which paragraph is that?
So
You don't know?
Parkway Community House, so I'm currently looking on page 34 in the table.
34.
And it's one of the recommendations was to begin a divestment conversation. So our head of assets is not with us today, but I understand that there has been a conversation with, certainly a letter sent, and then a conversation with each of the groups. We can follow up with you and let you know what was in that conversation.
Does that sound good to you, Arthur? Like, officers can follow up with you on that one.
Yeah.
Just before we do move to any recommendations, I'll just note that recommendation 3C talks about starting divestment processes for the Parkway Moira and Pomari assets. The table on page 30 is recommendations for each asset. They are essentially different pathways for Pomari and Moira and Parkway, just noting that Parkway very specifically ends in an if no viable option, demolish and recycle the investment. So I was just wondering what officers' intention is when they have those divestment conversations. Will those conversations come back before this council, or are we effectively agreeing today that if, for Parkway in particular, if points 1 to 3 come up with no interest, that we will be agreeing today to demolish and recycle that asset?
Council needs to agree to dispose of a building in any way, to sell it or divest it. And so if that's where those conversations lead, then that would come back to council for a decision.
Just a last question from me, page 30, Pomari Community House also includes the Pomari Hall. Should that be just listed there so it's clear that it's one package?
Currently, the conversation is around the community house, or the lease resetting is around the community house, but the conversation with the Pomari Hall leaseholders, the conversation's been about both buildings. So the conversation will be about both.
All right, folks, we've been going so long, my microphone has died. Are there any other questions that will inform the recommendations that we're about to discuss? Any burning questions anyone has before we get into discussion? No? Good. We'll move on into the discussion part, and I would just like to remind members, because it was noted by Councillor Barrett, there have been several conflicts declared, and our standing orders state that if a member considers they have this is non-financial conflict of interest in a matter, they must not take part in the discussions about the matter or any subsequent vote. So we are moving into discussion now. And we have a bunch of recommendations in the paper on page 25. And I feel that there may be something different requested for Avalon Pavilion. I was just wondering, before we move any particular recommendations or amendments, if people would like to share their thoughts about Avalon Pavilion and a good way forward for that one. Anyone got thoughts on Avalon Pavilion? Councillor Dyer?
Yeah, I'm just struggling to make sense of how an increase of 550% aligns with our desire to increase it by 30. Obviously, through the long-term plan process, which many of us around this table were at, we heard very loudly from these community groups that provide a really good community service, that the changes down the line, which is effectively where we are now, will impact the good they provide in the community. And that's why it was recognised that 19% was a good cost recovery, noting that 79% of that funding comes from the general rates, because there is a public good to these things. But we heard loud and clearly from these community groups that jumping straight to that cost recovery target would really impact what they can do. And so we decided to land on doing that incrementally at a cap of 30% every time it came up for renewal until we eventually got to the 19% increase. So looking at Avalon, which is the one we're specifically talking about, I mean, it's hard to see what the starting point is because that rate's been forgiven. But if it was 10% of the last year's revenue, that's $3,800. Increasing that to 25,000 is a 550% increase. So it's no wonder the pavilion is saying, we can't take this on. Can you take over the management of it? Obviously, we can't ask questions of them now, but if we were going to increase 30% on top of 3,800, they may very well come to a different position. I've also got concerns about the time frame for this. I understand everyone was sent a pretty generic letter 2 years ago. We signed it off as a council saying what was potentially coming. But to get a letter less than 2 weeks ago saying your rent is increasing to 25,000 or we'll take over the bookings, I don't think it's really been done in good faith, and I think we need to give them some more time. I understand there's still 8 weeks till the lease expires, but we're being asked today to start divestment, start bringing it back in-house. So I'm not sure what the recommendation should be, but that's my views.
Yeah, so I guess essentially we are being asked today to decide to bring management back into council. And we don't have to agree to that decision. If there's something else that members would prefer, there is a small amount of time that further discussion can be had or further information can be sought from officers to defer a decision to the full council meeting. And I'm happy to entertain a recommendation that we do that. Councillor Deputy Mayor Brown.
Yeah, if we defer it, it might get a little bit more clarity because I'm not sure what I'm not seeing here, but there is revenue of 38,000, even if it was 25,000, there's still a profit made. And we need to keep going back to first principles here of what the asset management plan is. I mean, there's a little bit of disagreement about whether we had said 30% was the maximum or not. It's a shame that this conversation is really sideswiping. There's several community houses in here and they just don't happen to be here who are deserved of attention as well. And I highlight Parkway Community House. They have a lease, but they haven't been paying, and that's actually with the Ministry of Education and Wainoiamata High School. So essentially, we are paying for that when the Ministry of Ed or Wainoiamata High could have paid for it. So there's other categories in here that warrant a little bit of attention. But if we must defer it, just to clarify points, that's okay. But, you know, we are constantly being asked to make decisions. I think with this one, there is just a bit of clarity on, and I'm keen to clarify that too, because it seems that it makes a good income. The reason of taking back assets for income is that this premise is on that we are aiming to, as much as possible, bring down rates, and it's very clear in the papers what the maintenance and depreciation is. So if we need to, just to clarify those points, yep. But the other ones need decisions as well, and we had Petone House come in, but we've got other houses equally that need attention too.
Yep, that's correct. And the proposal is to open conversations with all of those houses, except for a couple of them who have already indicated that they're happy to just move to the lease model, which is Kelson and Petone, according to this paper.
I just want to follow up on that, so I didn't mention it, that I've spoken to several of them and they were all very well aware that this was happening. I can't speak for Avalon, but there's been 3 community houses. They're very aware that this, they weren't given figures, but they know that this was happening.
Councillor Shaw, you've declared a conflict on this issue and we're in discussion.
No, this is about the Avalon Pavilion, and I'm just going to raise a question. I'm just a little bit uncomfortable about what appears to be a bit of miscommunication, and I'm all for deferring or putting that aside a little bit until we get a bit more clarity around it. I think we should be acting in good faith. The fact that this was built by the Rotary and Lions, and they at least deserve that opportunity to take it back or move on or whatever it is. But I think we just need to give them that extra time.
Okay, I'm seeing nods around the room. So what I might suggest, unless anyone has an alternate motion they would like to suggest, that we take a 5-minute recess and we will work something up for Avalon Pavilion in particular and come back and vote on that. Councillor Edwards.
Sorry, I shouldn't speak unless I'm going to speak with the microphone, but for me, it's only Avalon that needs a little bit of further discussion. We all know where we're heading with the other ones. There's just a little bit of lack of clarity over what would, for me, what would happen if we take Avalon back into bookable. We're then depriving the clubs of that revenue stream and limiting their options, where there might be another way of skinning the cat that everyone ends up happy with. That's the one that needs a bit more clarity.
Yeah, agreed. That's all I was suggesting, was coming up with a different recommendation for Avalon Pavilion. Councillor Puketake.
Sorry, I'm just conscious that we also had a member of the public speaking about Petone around the staggered.
We did, yeah. Also
so if we wanted to-
open to amendments from the floor. We haven't moved anything yet, so we will get to that. So we'll take a 5-minute recess for Avalon Pavilion and come back in 5. Thank you. Kia ora, everybody. So we have some recommendations up on the board there. The change, as mentioned, was to separate Avalon Pavilion out from the recommendations which are otherwise in the paper in Table 1. So that's in Recommendation 3. Avalon Pavilion is pulled out into Recommendation 4, which is to ask officers to further explore options for the lease and management of Avalon Pavilion, which achieve Council's requirements around cost recovery and optimisation, and report back with further details about revenue and expenditure of any proposed options at the Council meeting on 26th of May. I'm happy to move those recommendations, all of them up on the board there. Is there a seconder? Thank you to Councillor Edwards. Is there any discussion? No discussion? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. I just haven't put in anything for Petone or their suggestion to work with officers to stagger the increases and for them to handle it. If we could have something in there as well to agrees to work with Petone Community House to...
If you'd like to move an amendment, you're welcome to, just noting that probably the same applies to every community house, would have the same considerations. Councillor Brown, do you have a thought on that?
I'll just note that staggering, that goes into the criteria of the asset management strategy. So if we were staggering one, we'd need to stagger the lot.
I think we can note too that our council, amongst other funders, do have funding available potentially to assist with any costs over a year or over any year actually that people can apply to us or to others for funding. Noting that what I heard from Petone is they need some time to implement a new model and bring in additional revenue. You know, I think as has been noted, if we were to stagger for one, we would stagger for all, which involves going back and essentially changing the agreements with everybody. Is that an appropriate response, or is there something else that you would like to propose? Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, I'm going to take a weird stance on this because this is a recommendation from the committee to council. We've obviously got some time, as you noted before this goes to full council. The report says that I'm talking specifically just about community houses. I'm comfortable with where Avalon is up there. The report says that 9.5 has been set at the 19% cost recovery that we plan to get. It's just absent on the 30% incremental steps to get there. Obviously, that was the whole reason for bringing in the 30% was to stagger it, but you can't stagger from 0% to 9,500. The math just doesn't math. So I'd like officers between now and the full council meeting to put two options in front of us and what that would actually mean. One would be going straight to the 19%, which is 9.5, and another one to stagger that in some way. If we were doing 30%, is that a third? Is that do it over 3 years? I don't know. But I don't think we should be deciding that around this table. It would be good if officers could come to us with some options. I think going to these community houses that provide so much good in our community and saying it's jumping from 0 to 10,000, sorry, 9.5, I'm going to assume they haven't had much more than 2 weeks notice as the hauler has. Obviously, they're not here to answer that, but they've known this has been coming. I would just like to, one, hear from them all. Obviously, we've only heard from one. Some of us have received emails from others being very unhappy about the situation. We've got a bit of time before the full council meeting.
I would just like to flag again, you're welcome to move any amendment that you wish anyone
I'm
else.
comfortable to signal this.
I hear that.
But just noting when it comes to full council, that's still up there. I'll be saying no.
You might want to also note in the papers, in the table on page 33 and 34, rents are set for all of these community houses already, and they have been forgiven, so not charged. So any increase on a rent, actually most of these, it looks like their rent will be going down to $9,500, but actually being collected. And we have a legacy issue, I think, and it's come up in other meetings before, of not collecting things that we're supposed to be collecting for help these venues to help pay their own way. But open to any amendments or alternate recommendations, they'll be taken.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I asked, has this historically been never charged rent, or has this just been the last 2 years while we've been in this sort of confusing times? But it sounds like it's always been forgiven. So, yeah, that column's almost irrelevant because it's never been charged, so it might say that's the market value, but we've never charged it. The answer's zero. I mean, I'd be happy to move a additional recommendation that we ask officers to continue to work with the community groups, the community houses, on how a staggered approach may work for them.
Would anyone be willing to second that? Councillor Ravi, okay, we'll take it in the traditional manner. Could you just, we'll get it written up on there. That would be an additional recommendation. I'll put it in at number 5. Could you just say that again for the benefit of our scribe?
Said it off the top of my head.
Yeah.
That we ask officers to work with the community houses on how a staggered approach may work, yeah, for the next council meeting.
Just for clarity, I think this is actually a council decision rather than a conversation with community houses. The question is how much cost recovery does council require? And there's a recommendation about that. I don't think we can leave it to community groups to tell us what they can afford, because that's probably the reason we're in the situation we're in now. So I think it has to be just some direction from council about what its expectation is around cost recovery is probably what we need.
Yeah, well, like I said, we set it at 30%, so in my head it would be roughly a third a year is roughly what the 30% was kind of set on. So a third of 9.5 per year.
So that starting point was 0 and 30% would be 0, but
Yeah, that's why I said it won't work.
So if we come back with some clarity around how the lease increases have been applied, is that helpful?
No, that's in the paper. It says 19% is 9.5. That's how you've got to the target. That's just how we get there, is kind of jump that 30% because you can't do 30% on 0. So I don't want to speak for the houses, but in my head, I'm like, if we said do 3, 6, 9 over the next 3 years, we've hit the target of 19% cost recovery. Would that change their decision to divest? I don't know. They're not here. But I think it's something that would be useful to know if they've only had a matter of weeks.
I think probably rather than asking officers for more information about this or more conversations to be had, a decision should be made. If we would like to stagger those, then that should actually be proposed and agreed to or not agreed to. I'm sure if we went out to community houses and said, would you like us to stagger this? The answer will be yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't take 8 weeks to determine that the answer will be yes. So I think if that's a proposal, we don't have the cost of that in front of us, but it's roughly in the order of $6,000 per house in year 1.
The issue for me is that consequently to us putting that on the table, these houses have said, we can't afford $9.5 grand. We're going to have to divest it or start using bookable because we've said 9. If we said, actually, it's only 3 this year and 6
Yes, so if you would like to propose that, I think that's what you should propose. And we can decide whether to include that in our recommendations today.
And for clarity, that requires an increased level of rates funding for these houses over that time.
Yeah.
So do you have an amendment, Councillor Dyer, to what's currently on the screen, noting that there's half a sentence there based on what you initially said, but...
I think it's still worth asking the community houses, would a staggered approach change your decision to pull out of the house? There's houses saying, we're not going to run this house if you're charging us 9.5 a year. If we say, we're going to stagger it, will that change
I
the
think
decision?
rather than asking them, we need to decide whether we're offering that to them and go to them with that offer, because there's already a proposal here to open divestment conversations with them. That divestment conversations can include whatever we want it to include. If you want it to include a staggered approach, we need to decide whether that we're offering that to them or not, rather than just having a discussion about something we aren't offering to them.
Yeah, but we're only starting the divestment conversations because they can't afford 9,500 jump from 0 to 9.5 in 1 year. They can't afford that. So they've said, we can't do that. What's the next option? Divestment. So I just feel like this is jumping straight to divestment. Whereas if we put on the table,
As I said earlier, you're welcome to propose any amendment you want. You could propose an amendment for our officers to have conversations with people, or you could propose an amendment for us to agree to a staggered approach to this, but we just need a clear amendment. Otherwise, we'll just move forward with what's on the
okay, well, if you want to flesh number
table.
5 out a bit to a staggered approach of 30% over the next 3 years.
To work with the community houses on a staggered approach.
Yeah, to see whether
So you are asking our members today to agree to a staggered approach?
To agree to have a conversation with the community houses, and then when this comes to full council, we make a decision on divestment.
Okay.
Effectively, I want to put this on the table and the full council decide on it. I just don't think we have enough from the houses.
I think the houses we're talking about, I think, is Moira is one, is it right? And they would definitely prefer a staggered approach.
Yeah.
And the other one, I think, is Tata Pomari. And I'm just going to speak for them and say they would definitely choose a staggered approach to.
I think they all, that was my
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, if they've said, look, we'll pay the 9,500 and we're saying, would you like a staggered approach? Of course they're going to say yes. But most of them have said, we can't afford 9.5. Can we have divestment conversations? What will that look like? That will cost them more money, let's be honest.
So is your proposal then to offer all community houses a staggered increase in their rent over the next 3 years?
No, it's
'Cause
to
I
ask
think-
officers to put that in front of them and see whether that would change their decision to go to divestment. And when it comes back to full council, we can have a nice table that says, we've spoken to these 5 houses. 3 of them have now said if it's only $3,000 this year and 6 next, yeah, we can probably find that shortfall.
Probably just need to also remind elected members about the target operating model and the fact that we have agreed to reduce our stock of assets in the future, and these are the kind of assets that we'll be talking about.
Yeah.
Some of the assets that we are discussing leases for today, I expect to be back on the table in terms of the Tom divestment conversation.
Yeah.
So I think the offer of divestment was brought in because of the Tom, and that if there are groups who are interested in taking them on, they've indicated that they're probably going to be asked again as part of the Tom conversations. So I think we have to think about this in the context of council's desire to reduce its stock of assets, council's need to reduce its stock of assets to lessen the rates burden.
Yeah, but the Tom hasn't agreed to reduce, what does it say? Council has agreed to reduce its asset stock. We haven't agreed to that through the Tom. We've agreed to a very high level strategic document to have those conversations with the community. But I don't think we've decided as a council, we're getting rid of assets. We have to. I don't think that's come before.
So I think that the Tom says that council's agreed to rationalise assets.
Yeah, but
Yeah, at a high level, yeah.
At a very high
Councillor
level, yeah.
Stellinger has a contribution to make. Sorry, your microphone's not working.
I'm not an expert on setting rules, but can I move this amendment be put? We're going around in circles.
You can. I'll just quickly note that the amendment has been changed since it was seconded by Councillor Ravi. Councillor Ravi, are you happy with the amended amendment? Are you happy to still second that? Okay. In that case, Councillor Stellinger is right. He can move that the motion be put. So I will put the amendment, just number 5, the proposed amendment. All those in favour, please say aye. All those opposed? That's a no, I think, if you're opposed. I declare that motion carried on the voices. We can take that by division.
So division was called for by Councillor Brown, Deputy Mayor Brown, and if you could just let me know which way you're voting. Councillor Karen Young.
Aye.
Councillor Amelia Tonga-Grant. Councillor Tony Stellinger. Councillor Prabha Ravi. Councillor Te Awa Pukitapu.
Yeah, no.
Councillor Chris Parkin.
Aye.
Councillor Tui Lewis. Councillor Simon Edwards.
No.
Councillor Brady Dyer.
Aye.
Councillor Glenda Barrett. Oh, thank you. Deputy Mayor Brown.
No.
Mayor Laban.
No.
So is Naomi also not voting? Yeah. And then you'll be the casting vote. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3 is 5. Yeah, so I'll get you. Right. Oh, right. Councillor Mitchell.
No. Just noting, sorry, Councillor Pukatapu, you're not to vote on this one, so your vote won't be counted on this one because of your conflict. It relates to the community houses. Yeah, kia ora.
Sorry, I shouldn't have asked for that. So that's with the exclusion of the councillors who are conflicted, which is 3. The vote is 6 against and 5 for.
Okay, so that amendment is lost. That gets removed now, and we go back to the substantive motion. Is there any further discussion before I put those recommendations on the board, which have been moved and seconded? No? In that case, I will put the motion.
Point of order, sir. I believe Councillor Barrett wasn't actually conflicted on that because it didn't involve Avalon Pavilion. It was a specifically community house. So she does actually get to vote.
She does. Well, it does relate only to, yeah, it's up to her if she would like to vote on that. Would you like to vote on that one, Councillor Barrett? No, she's going to abstain anyway. Yeah? Okay, so we're back to what's on the board there, which is now the substantive motion, which has been moved and seconded.
Sorry, Chair, to be a pain. Would you mind taking in parts with number 3 just being excluded?
Number 3 being taken separately?
Yes, please. 3B.
3B? 3A?
3A and B, I think, are the two relating to the community houses.
Okay, 3A and B. All right. So I will first put the recommendations 1, 2, 3C, 4, and 5. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. I declare those motions carried. And items 3A and 3B, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
I declare that the motion carried. All right. We got through that one. Moving on to our next paper, which is a proposal for long-term leases over reserve land. It's on page 36 of the agenda. I'll welcome back Arthur Nelson and Nicole Purifoy to speak to that item, page 36 of the agenda.
Kia ora. This will also be taken report as read, please.
Okay, then are there any questions? This is pretty simple implementation of what we were talking about earlier. Does any member have a question? No, in that case, I will move the motions, the recommendations in the paper on page 36 that the committee notes and receives the report and approves the granting of long-term land leases subject to standard council terms and conditions. Mā wai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Ravi. Is there any debate? No. In that case, I put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapua ki au, kua mana te mōtini. I declare that motion carried. Thank you very much. Item 8 is the City Safety 6-monthly report. It's on page 39 of the agenda. I'll ask Adrian Moore, Head of Connected Communities, to speak to that item. Kia ora, Adrian.
E rau rangatira, mihi ana atu ki a koutou katoa I tēnei ata. Firstly, I'd just take the opportunity to introduce to you all our City Safety Manager, Dion Neal, who joined us in January this year. So welcome to Dion. Replaces Macca, for those of you who were around during Macca's time. So today we put in front of you the 6-monthly City Safety Report. First report for you as a new group. Purpose of this report is really just to kind of convey to you all our key trends, what we're seeing in respect of city safety, some of the impacts and the implications for us here at Council in terms of planning and delivery.
Our report's informed by various data sources, not just police data, but also what we're seeing through our CCTV, resident satisfaction survey, provider insights, and other data that informs the state of city safety across Te Ao Kairanga ki Tai. So I'll take the report as read and welcome any questions or conversations. Kia ora mai tātou katoa.
Thank you, Adrian. Councillor Parkin has a question.
Thank you for the report. I note on Appendix B, the police data shows the hotspot of the city centre being a highest crime rate or highest crime incidences. Is it possible, and I suspect the answer is no because this is somebody else's data, but is it possible to get that data actually broken down by head of population? Because that population density is actually the key thing. Yes, sure, you might have more incidences happening where you've got more people, but that's normal. I think a more useful graph would be actually showing where the incidences are happening in terms of other environmental factors.
Thank you, Councillor Parkin. The answer to that question, yes, possible, not easy. Probably involve an official information request through to police who collect that data.
I think noting too, if you're talking about where people live, probably our population in the central city is really low, and that figure will be quite a weird ratio compared to where people actually do live. Yeah. Any further questions? Councillor Shaw.
Just picking up on a piece about graffiti, it's something that particularly annoys me. And there is graffiti on bus stops and rail station pillars, and there's graffiti on power poles. So is there any sort of working together on that? Because there's a significant piece of graffiti on the Pumari rail pillar that has just been there for years and years, and it's a really bad look to people coming into the northern suburbs. So do you sort of link with Greater Wellington Regional Council on those in any way?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Shaw. Yes, the information around graffiti reporting came to us from one of our council teams that leads our efforts in that regard, and I am aware that they do work with others around that, but particularly in the case of the graffiti that you've just articulated, I'm not aware of it, but I'm happy to make that connection with the team just to ensure that they've got a response, or it's visible and they've got a response plan around it.
Just as a quick follow-up question of process, because I know I report graffiti all the time myself, and it can be reported through council system, but in a lot of cases it's actually passed on to another party to remove it who owns that property. That's correct, right?
Correct where it depends on where it is. If it's on public property, then usually it'll be a council response or working with others. If it's on private property, then it's actually the responsibility of the landowner.
Okay, Mayor Laban had a question, and then we'll come to Councillor Tonga Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In my earlier life, I was the one-time Hutt City Community Constable. And pitching ahead 30-odd years to today, there's no police presence on the street of any significance that I've seen in recent years, and much is made of CCTV. So 2 questions. Do we think we're getting value from the CCTV, and what's our relationship like with the police in regard to having a stronger presence in the city centre?
Can have a go at initially answering that, and I welcome your insights as well, Dion. But thank you for your question, Mayor Laban. In terms of our overall relationship with police, feedback from police, and particularly our area commander Wade Jennings, is that our relationship is functioning well. It's a very strong relationship, and they have they are seeing value, not just from our overall relationship, and particularly around CCTV, but some of the other areas that we're working together. We have invited Inspector Jennings, Wade, to come along to have a kōrero directly with you all in July. So a conversation that we invited around this time last year with your predecessors, and it was a conversation that went really well in terms of hearing police's perspectives about community safety, the things that they're seeing, the things that they're worried about, and the value that they're seeing through council's relationship. So we're expecting that Wade will come and speak with you all around July timeframe. And that would be the opportunity, I suppose, to ask him any further questions about the things that we're doing together. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Dan?
No, probably the value that our CCTV supervisor does an absolutely sterling effort managing that tool, which is not only obviously a crime prevention tool, but an evidential tool. And so there is a lot of pressure on her to provide evidence for police and also for external agencies as well. So I just want to acknowledge the great work that she's doing for us.
Yeah, Laban, I might just add to that we do know, and it's sort of articulated in the paper, the growing demand of CCTV, and I suppose it's an issue that's been recognised, and that we'd like to take some time to work through as part of our target operating model work. So we'd expect to come back to council with further insights and recommendations in that regard over the next year or so.
Councillor Tonga Grant.
My question is also related to the CCTV, and given that our city safety is underpinned by community wellbeing and trust, and you've just mentioned the growing reliance on our CCTV cameras, I guess my question is what are the risks that we face if the service is scaled back and treated as non-core?
I can have a go at answering that. The short answer to your question, Councillor Tonga Grant, and thank you for asking it, is at this stage we don't have an answer to that question because we haven't done the work. So I would expect when we do come back to council to report on what the future options for CCTV are, it would articulate what some of those risk factors are and what some of the mitigating actions might be.
Just additionally on that, I would add that I think we've heard that there is tremendous reliance on CCTV and it provides huge value to police. The question that we'll be asking through the target operating model is whose role is it to then resource that? And I think that central government is requiring local government to look at its core activities, and policing is a central government activity in Lower Hutt that we'll be looking at what is the right place for that to be resourced.
Councillor Edwards, I think, was next, and then Councillor Parkin has a question as well.
Andrea, just address my question. I'm interested in whether the police see it as their role to contribute to the running costs of these networks if it's a valuable tool to them.
I think the current arrangement that's in place doesn't really look too far into the roles and responsibilities. It's more at an operational level, but I think through the time that's something we'll need to understand.
Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora. I'm just thinking back, we stopped funding our Safe City ambassadors to shift to funding CCTV. I'm surprised that we're noting that there's an uptick in use as a bad thing, because that uptick in use was I would have expected to be expected when we shifted away from Safe City ambassadors. Is that being factored into our Tom thoughts?
I think the change in focus was around extending the CCTV network, which is the physical cameras. There are now a lot more cameras, and there's a lot more. There are a lot more cameras that can be viewed in the CCTV suite, and so it's providing much broader coverage. The resource to monitor and download hasn't changed, and so that's again, that'll be a Tom question.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from members? No, in which case I will put the recommendations on page 39. They are just noting recommendations. One, that the committee notes the current trends in city safety, and two, notes the increasing demand for CCTV, and that further work will be undertaken as part of the target operating model work to determine the future delivery model, noting that this is not currently a core service. Mawai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Councillor Stallinger, is there any discussion? No, I think I was just going to note the same thing that Andrea just mentioned, that of course when we put more cameras in more areas, there is more demand for the footage from those cameras because they're literally capturing more of what we want them to capture. It is putting pressure on our team, so something to discuss in the future, I think, but not for today. Is there any further discussion? Deputy Mayor Brown.
I just, carrying on from Councillor Parkin, that we have had a shift in its carrot and stick type community action of increasing the CTVs to pick up crime, where we had the Safe City ambassadors that were around walking. There was some in Wainuiamata, and that was an early intervention. So just noting that we could keep putting up CTVs endlessly, whereas what is our options to be early intervention?
Any further debate? No, I will now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapuakio kua mana te mōtini. I declare that motion carried. Our next item is item 9, Rangatahi 6-monthly update. It's on page 48 of the agenda. Adrian's going to stay at the table and be joined by Nat. Kia ora.
Oh, kia ora anō. Hello again. So shifting focus now to our Rangatahi 6-monthly update to you all. First to you as a group, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Nat McDonald, our Rangatahi facilitator for those who don't know Nat. Also, just like to take the opportunity to acknowledge and give thanks for the conversations already that we've had today, particularly with Councillors Tonga Grant and Young, in respect of your interests as a council in Rangatahi. And I understand that the thinking in that regard is still shaping. So look forward to further conversations and kōrero with you both and more broadly around what we do moving forward. But this report really kind of reflects the last 6 months of activity with our rangatahi, underneath our Rangatahi Engagement Action Plan. Couple of highlights: we've got over 460 initiatives reaching over 16,000 rangatahi in the city. Solid progress against the action plan, particularly in respect of partnerships and the establishment of Te Raranga Kairangi, our youth leadership network, place-based initiatives and activations, both in terms of what council is doing to uplift rangatahi participation, as well as what the community are doing for themselves with our support, and an increase in use of data to support evidence-led decisions around where we focus our effort and our energy. So we're pretty proud of the progress that has been made to date. And also observing, I suppose, some opportunities moving forward in terms of being able to work more holistically across the system. Lots of different teams across council and outside of council doing work to support rangatahi participation and engagement. So we're seeing a bit of an opportunity there to work a little bit more holistically with others as part of the ecosystem, but also recognising that council's role in that, and holding to council's role and council's capacity in that. So yeah, just an opportunity now to take your questions or have a conversation with you around our work on rangatahi. Kia koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Thank you very much. Nat, did you have anything to say, or we can go to questions?
She did it pretty good.
She did a pretty good job. Pretty good.
That's it. Yeah, no, I guess with the election happening last year and we kind of missed the actual 6-month mark for last year. So it's actually, this report kind of encapsulates everything that I've done since I've started in this role. So yeah, like Adrian said, pretty proud of the mahi that's been done, excited for what's moving forward. And yeah, open to any kōrero or partai that you guys have.
Thank you. Go Councillor Ravi, then Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. This report is really good and great to see the initiatives. My question is, how do you reach out to the ethnic community? I see you've engaged with Voice of Aroha and likes of them, but that is only capturing a section of the migrant, and it's mainly refugee community, Voice of Aroha and few others, but there are so many other ethnic youth that have not been part of this. So how do you envisage doing that, or have you done anything in that space?
Yep. So yeah, we've got some close connections with specific orgs like Voice of Aroha, and then we've also been working with the Ministry of Education and their, they deliver regular
annual events and programs for, specifically for our ethnic and migrant youth. But I guess my take on a solution to that is we as council need to get better with communicating with rangatahi, full stop. And being able to do that and being able to create safe spaces for young people, it will naturally lead into being able to create specific safe spaces for young people and other minorities. It's a youth workers kind of constant battle, is trying to make sure that young people of all backgrounds are cared for and we can create those safe spaces for them. And as council, as like community-based organizations, we need to be able to do that baseline stuff well. We need to know that when a young person walks into one of our facilities, they're going to be treated like a human being. And then, as you said, the nuances of adding to that ethnic background, cultural significance and cultural kind of differences is an even wider conversation. But that's why I really like working in the programs and innovations team closely with our other facilitators. So Bartul is doing some beautiful work in that space, and it always just flows so naturally when both facilitators can kind of navigate those paths together.
Sure. Just a follow-up question. A lot of the ethnic youth don't even know that this exists or this sort of a service is available or the engagement is happening. So my question is about how do we get that awareness out so that they can come along to some of these services or hubs, wherever you have your initiatives.
Yeah. I'd just add to, or emphasise, I suppose, what Nat was saying. Direct answer to your question, Councillor Ravi. We do have an ethnic, migrant, former refugees communities facilitator, Bartul. You know, I suppose there's an opportunity identified there to be able to bring a bit more sort of stronger collaboration between your role and her role, particularly around engagement opportunities with rangatahi from ethnic backgrounds. And similarly, you know, working alongside our Te Tira Māori crew around engagement opportunities with rangatahi Māori as well. So it's a process of ongoing evolution.
Yeah,
so we'll factor that into work program planning for the year ahead.
And I guess if you want specific, like what we've been doing in that space that might not be outlined in the report, we work closely with Kura and with their ESOL classes. We've had a few awesome interactions with Hutt Valley High and English Training Centre down the road. We've got a good relationship with them through Bartul and through the connections that she's made.
Thank you. I did read that, but those are all very focused on refugees, more than migrants. So my question is about Asians and like Filipinos, new Filipinos who have come. They don't have a language issue, but they are not engaged, and there's so much need there as well. So it's just a comment, thank you, and a question to see how can we improve that.
So we'd welcome the opportunity to work more closely with you if you've got some ideas in that regard.
Councillor Shaw, I think, had a question.
Thank you. This is a really good report. Some great stuff happening there. I particularly enjoyed the Meet the Candidate session that was held here. It was really, really good to try and get young people involved in civic engagement. So, and some great questions came from the people that you brought into chambers. Just the question I have is, do you intend to do something similar with the elections coming up later this year?
That's a great question.
Yes. Yeah, I would love to. We did outline in the report that we've been doing some really close, tight-knit work with the Electoral Commission, and so have a few other facilitators in the team as well. And holding that relationship throughout the local election has just led so naturally into the general election. And our young people are very vocal on what they want to see the world become. And we actually just missed the deadline for this report, but we had a wānanga over in Wairarapa. They have 3 youth councils over there, and we don't have a youth council here, but we've got Te Ranga Kairangi. And so Erin from the Electoral Commission, we actually worked together to develop a Council 101 session that led into a how and why you should vote in the general election kaupapa wānanga it was last week. And it was so good. We actually managed to get 4 students from Nainai to come over the hill. And it was 14 awesome young people discussing why they are going to encourage their whānau to vote, their friends to vote, why they want to, why it's important, what civics means to them. And it was a beautiful kaupapa, and it's so easily just copied and pasted over this side of the hill. So stay tuned. But yeah, definitely big plans in the works for those. And that space, I guess.
Are there any further questions? Deputy Mayor Brown.
Yeah, thanks for the report. There's clearly heaps of stuff happening, so that's really, really good. And I can see some of them are like Twilight are really popular events. Yeah, there's a lot here of what's happening. I'd like to see the report have a little bit of a link to outcomes as well, like identify what's working, like you just talked about an event that works, so that we're, you know, it's such a slim resource that we're pointing things into what works and maybe putting aside the things that aren't getting, in previous youth council, there were things that didn't work, so identifying that. So it'd be good to see that in the reporting as well. Yeah.
Any further questions, folks? Councillor Young.
Kia ora koroa. Thank you very much for this. Just to kind of echo a little bit of Councillor Shaw's comment around Te Ranga Kairangi's election event, because I think that was probably one of the most fun things we could have done during that time. Yeah, things you learn about each other, eh? But I really appreciate the mahi you're doing. And I guess, you know, perhaps not necessarily a question to be answered at this very moment, but perhaps a question with a wero around just some thinking. You know, I know we've talked a little bit about it before when we've had our initial conversation, as councillors who are really passionate about working in the rangatahi space, but just something to perhaps wrestle with is, you know, what other ways could elected members be connecting and better with our rangatahi collectively? One of the key things around working with our young people in our rangatahi is not just, you know, if we have two people who are dedicated and passionate about our young people, but like I'd love to see our whole table really passionate and dedicated to our young people. And I also think there's a lot to be said around just that curiosity and that playfulness that actually evokes their ability for us to think more creatively and be better leaders. So yeah, just a bit of a thought for you in terms of like how best could we as elected members be working alongside with you. Kia ora.
All right, if there's no further questions, I'm going to move the motions. They're on page 48 of the agenda to note various parts of the paper. Just drawing your attention to number 3.2, that the committee endorses a continued focus on strengthening coordination, partnerships, equity of access and the use of data and insights to support more consistent and outcomes-focused engagement. Mawai e tautoko, do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Is there any discussion? I think we just had a bit. But yes, thank you for the great work, Nat, and we look forward to what comes in the next 6 months as well. So I will now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapua ki au, kua mana te mōtini. I declare that motion carried. All right. I think we'll just work through this next agenda item and get that one out of the way, which is item 10, the update on Council's climate change work, page 61 of the agenda. We have Miriam Randall, Senior Advisor, Climate and Sustainability. No Ewan that I can see. Kia ora, Miriam. Oh, Ewan's over there, hiding. Welcome to join us at the table, Ewan, but kia ora, Miriam.
Kia ora. Just by way of introducing the paper, I just wanted to note that the Low Carbon Acceleration Fund is now open. It will be open until the 1st of June. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to encourage anyone to apply that is eligible, of course, and encourage councillors to promote this fund. And if you have any connections with eligible legal entities, to kind of encourage them, tap them on the shoulder and encourage them to look at the funding criteria and make sure that they know about it. In the previous round, we didn't quite allocate all of the funding budget we had, so it would be lovely to be able to distribute that this year, if possible. And that, yeah, particularly this year with the fuel crisis that is happening, it's a really good opportunity for businesses and trusts, legal entities to reduce some of that operational cost as well as reducing their footprint. So just wanted to highlight that one for you. Other than that, happy to take the paper as read.
Thank you, Miriam. Are there any questions? Councillor Young.
Kia ora, Miriam. Thank you very much for this. Just wanted to check around that fund, the funds. What is the pool for those? It's just a bit easier to sell that story if we know the amounts. Thank you.
That's a very good question. I know for the Low Carbon Acceleration Fund, we have 150,000 that is in the funding envelope this year, and we have a funding cap per project of up to 40,000 in co-funding. So they have to come up with the other 50% themselves, but potentially we could fund a few projects at the maximum of 40,000. If they apply for less, then that money could be distributed to more projects. I can't speak to the Community Climate Action Fund funding envelope, but I believe it is of a similar nature.
She's eyeballing me behind you. So kia ora koutou, just in relation to the Community Climate Action Fund, which is the other fund that will be considered under this category by the panel in June, is about 130,000 for that fund. No funding cap currently, but in previous funding rounds, we have actually struggled to allocate out that funding as well. So the funding round is open now for both.
Can I just clarify, is that based on wards as well, or is that just open?
I missed that. Could you ask that again?
Sorry, just clarifying if that's based on wards, or is that like whole city?
Whole city. Yep.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor Brown.
Two questions. When is it progressing? We approved the solar on Te Nainai Pool. How is that progressing? And see, it still hasn't gone out to procurement. And the second question is around the diesel trucks that we've got. When are we swapping them out, and why are we waiting for hybrid instead of just going EV? I understand you were considering hybrid.
To answer the first question, so for the solar PV system for Te Nainai Pool, there's a procurement plan being developed at the moment. So from my understanding is that that procurement would go live later in May, and then based on the decisions following that, we would see implementation probably during the 26, 27 financial year, so later this year would be the earlier part of that. The second question around the diesel trucks, are you referring to the curbside service or? Yeah. So the curbside service is increasingly being electrified, and there's been a number of side loader trucks that have been introduced into the fleet over the last 6 months, as you will remember from previous reports. Waste Management is just about to open their new site, not Manor Park, but charging facilities down at their Seaview site, and we are rolling out some additional satellites up at the landfill for charging those curbside trucks. Once that's operational, so that'll be this month, we will see more of them on the streets. Overall, the plan is still to have a fully electrified service by the end of the year. The question is really the remaining trucks, which are of a smaller nature, and how quickly they can deliver those. But basically, the big side loaders they're effectively all electrified by the middle of this year. And we don't use hybrids, so they'll be fully electric.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Ravi.
Just with regards to the Nainai Pool, do we have a budget allocated for the work? And also, if yes, then is there a timeline, and how does it fit with the target operating model? Thank you.
Yes, there is a budget allocated. I don't know over the top of my head what that was, but that was allocated, you will remember, late last year with the leftover funding from the pool construction project. I think it was in the order of about $700,000 or $800,000, but that's just the order of funding. So the facilities team, we can follow up and come back to you on that exact answer. In terms of the timeline, as I just mentioned before, the initial stage is procurement, and then that would be followed by installation probably during the coming financial year.
How does that fit with the target operating model? It's from the previous year's budget? Is that what is being?
Yes, it's utilising leftover CapEx funding from the pool construction. It does fit with the TOM in the sense that it will reduce operating costs in the future.
Councillor Young, do you have another question?
Kia ora. Just a question around vehicle fleets, as I've had a few people ask me, just in terms of how is vehicle relevancy measured, and how does Hutt City Council stay on top of it? So like how often is this assessed, and how often are vehicles replaced?
Yep. So when we did the fleet review back in 2019, which kicked off the work to effectively improve the efficiency, utilisation of the fleet, and also the electrification of the fleet, the key advice was, and that hasn't changed, is that ultimately we are aiming to reduce the total cost of ownership of the fleet. And you can achieve that through a variety of ways, either by increasing the utilisation of vehicles, so you just buy fewer of them, and also making sure that when you buy them, you don't hold on to them for a very long time. So typically we hold on to vehicles for about 3 to 5 years, and that ensures that we still maximize residual value when we sell them. So if we were to hold on to them for longer, the resale value will be a lot less, and there will be other costs over time starting to pile up in terms of maintenance and other things. So typically we operate on a sort of 3 to 5 year basis, and that's broadly in line with what lease companies do with their business model.
Councillor Parkin?
Just a follow-up question to that. Do the maintenance costs of EVs, seeing as they've got less moving parts, etc., is that significantly lower, and is that actually changing our approach to how long we hold on to the vehicles for at this point?
There is clear evidence that some costs are significantly lower with EVs, when it comes to the motor and the non-moving parts, so to speak. And I do recall there's some research that was done by the AA that has confirmed that. When it comes to other maintenance, whether that's tyres or door handles falling off, EVs are probably as prone as other vehicles to experience those sort of issues. And we also have, small incidents, parking related, that result in costs for the fleet. So, those things are not really EV specific. They just tend to come up over time.
Councillor Stellinger.
Yes, thanks. I've got kind of a general question, but can apply it to specific circumstances. I guess what I'm interested in is the total operational costs. We could take vehicles as an example. Do we track over the years the total costs of the fleet, including depreciation, interest funding, fuel, electricity? And can we see an actual reduction over time in those costs, or an increase? Do we monitor that?
The answer is yes and no. So if we're trying to compare the costs of the current fleet in its entirety, in terms of purchase of vehicles, operational costs, and residual value recovery, and depreciation and those sort of factors, I have asked the question, and our finance system is unfortunately not set up to enable that comparison, because we've moved from a leasing model to a purchase model. But since probably for the last 3 or 4 years, we can definitely track total costs for the fleet. And ultimately, if we have fewer vehicles, then that will also result in lower costs. And the fleet has reduced by about 20 vehicles compared to 2019. So I would expect the cost to be lower. And the estimate or the advice at the time when we did the fleet review was that there would be lower costs as a result of a number of changes, whether that's fewer vehicles, people no longer taking home vehicles, so FBT doesn't apply. Fringe benefit tax was actually quite a significant cost at the time, because every council vehicle was taken home. That's no longer the case. And things like purchasing instead of leasing. So because we can access all of government costs, our purchase costs are very competitive, and we don't effectively pay a profit margin to the leasing company.
I guess I wasn't so much interested in the anecdotal reasons why it might be cheaper or not. Just the actual facts of what those costs are. And a bit surprising we can't access what it used to cost us to lease the vehicles. Putting that issue aside, I did raise similar questions about the solar panels, which may well have been a good decision. Councillors may remember I was the only one that voted against it, and it was really just because we weren't given the costs. We were given the capital cost, we were given how much electricity we might save, but there was no information to know whether overall it would save us money or not. When you took into account the interest costs on the capital, the depreciation of that, repairs that might be needed and so on. So I'd just like to ask that in the future when we're evaluating these sort of investment decisions, we get the full costs and benefits for our assessment, because I just have this feeling we can't really assess that at the moment.
I might just briefly respond. So I can, when we're looking at the particular business case for solar PV, I can't comment on the specifics because that was led by the facilities team, so we might have to direct the question to that team. When it comes to other business cases like, for example, the EV charging one that we did a few years ago, we've always looked at the whole costs. And typically you will remember for a number of the business cases that have come up to council regarding the gas phase out, we've always looked at net present value, and that incorporates all the costs and benefits and what otherwise would have happened. So I'm pretty confident we have got that covered, but take your point, happy to take that away and make sure that we are doing that. When it comes to the fleet specific question, that is a finance function, so I have to direct that question to them to see if we can make that comparison.
Thank you for that. That's encouraging. I wasn't really wanting to make extra work for decisions we've made in the past. It was more just for future decisions if we can ensure that we get that kind of data. Thank you.
Councillor Ravi, did you have another question?
Sorry, it was the same question that Councillor Tony had asked.
Sure, thank you. Are there any further questions? And no, in that case, I will move the recommendations that the committee notes the update on climate change work streams currently underway, and 2 notes that updates are only provided for those projects or activities where significant progress has been made or where significant changes have occurred since the previous full annual update on the 3rd of September 2025. Mawai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brown. Is there any discussion? Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight paragraph 7 that says we are 4 diesel utes off being 100% renewable vehicles. 2 of those are the councils, which are due to be replaced in the next 3 months. The remaining 2 are our 2 CCOs, which we don't directly control. So I'd just like to throw down the window to our 2 CCOs to look at it. He's left the room. Yeah, to becoming a fully 100% renewable fleet would be quite an accomplishment.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? No, I will now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapuakio kua mana te mōtini. I declare that motion carried. Item 11 is an information item. It's the Connected Communities Climate and Resilience Committee Forward Programme for 2026 on page 64 of the agenda. Does any member have a question about that? No. In that case, I move the motion that the Forward Programme for 2026 attached as Appendix 1 to the report be received and noted. Mawai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Tonga Grant. I now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapuakio kua mana te mōtini. I declare the motion carried. Item 12 is questions, and I have received no questions. Item 13 is exclusion of the public. I move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely item 14, Civic Honours and Youth Services Awards 2026 for privacy reasons. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Is there any debate? I now put the motion that has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I declare that motion carried. We are overdue a break, so I'm going to suggest we take, how long do we need? 10, 15? Proper break? 10 minutes.